Okay, I'll start off, Jayan. Okay,
Yes.
yeah. And by the way, let's start off with what you're going to be saying in the next few years, Sairam. Okay, uh, each of us has a center, though we usually don't recognize it as such. Neither do we recognize the all encompassing effects of that center on every aspect of our lives. Let's briefly examine several centers or core paradigms people typically have for a better understanding of how they affect these four fundamental dimensions and ultimately the sum of life that flows from them. Spouse centeredness. Marriage can be the most intimate, the most satisfying, the most enduring, growth producing of human relationships. It might seem natural and proper to be centered on one's husband or wife, but experience and observation tell a different story. Over the years, just a second, please. Over the years, I have been involved in working with many troubled marriages, and I have observed a certain thread weaving itself through almost every spouse centered relationship I have encountered. That thread is strong emotional dependence. If our sense of emotional worth comes primarily from a marriage, then we become highly dependent on that relationship. We become vulnerable to the moods and feelings, the behavior and the treatment of our spouse, or to any external event that may impinge on the relationship. A new child, in laws, economic setbacks, social successes, and so forth. When responsibilities increase and stresses come in the marriage, we tend to revert, just a second, we tend to revert to the scripts we were given as we were growing up. But so does our spouse. And those scripts are usually different. Different ways of handling financial, child discipline, or in-law issues come to the surface. When these deep-seated tendencies combine with emotional dependency in the marriage, the spouse-centered relationship reveals all its vulnerability. When we are dependent on the person with whom we are in conflict, both need and conflict are compounded. Love hate overreactions, fight or flight tendencies, withdrawal, aggressiveness, bitterness, resentment, and cold competition are some of the usual results. When these occur, we tend to fall even further back on the background tendencies and habits in an effort to justify and defend our own behavior, and we attack our spouses. Inevitably, anytime we are too vulnerable, we feel the need to protect ourselves from further wounds. So we resort to sarcasm, cutting humor, criticism, anything that will keep from exposing the tenderness within. Each partner tends to wait on the initiative of the other for love, only to be disappointed but also confirmed as to the rightness of the accusations made. There's only phantom security in such a relationship when all appears to be going well. Guidance is based on the emotion of the moment. Wisdom and power are lost in the counter dependent negative interaction. Family centeredness. I hope I'm going to ask you questions in, like, say, 10 minutes. I hope you're listening carefully.
Yes.
Yeah. Family centeredness. Another common center is the family. This too may seem to be natural and proper. As an area of focus and deep investment, it provides great opportunities for deep relationships, for loving, for sharing, for much that makes life worthwhile. But as a center, it ironically destroys the very elements necessary to family success. People who are family centered get their sense of security or personal worth from the family tradition and culture or the family reputation. Thus, they become vulnerable to any changes in the tradition or culture, and to any influences that would affect that reputation. Family centered parents do not have the emotional freedom, the power to raise their children with their ultimate welfare truly in mind. They derive their own security from the family. Their need to be popular with their children may override the importance of a long term investment in their children's growth and development. Or they may be focused on the proper and correct behavior of the moment. Any behavior that they consider improper threatens their security. They become upset, guided by the emotions of the moment, spontaneously reacting to the immediate concern rather than the long term growth and development of the child. They may overreact and punish out of bad temper. They tend to love their children conditionally, making them emotionally dependent or counter dependent and rebellious. Money centeredness. Another logical and extremely common center to people's life is making money. Economic security is basic to one's opportunity to do much in any other dimension. In hierarchy or continuum of needs, physical survival and financial security comes first. Other needs are not activated until the basic need is satisfied, at least minimally. Most of us face economic worries. Many forces in the wider culture can and do act upon our economic situation, causing or threatening such disruption that we often experience concern and worry that may not always rise to the conscious surface. Sometimes there are apparently noble reasons given for making money, such as the desire to take care of one's family. And these things are important, but to focus on money making as a center will bring about its own undoing. Okay, now what have you understood till now? We have about 5 minutes before, 3, 4 minutes before I want to start the next one.
Everyone has a center that influences all aspects of life, often without conscious awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage is deeply fulfilling but overly centered on a
No, 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 Jayant,
spouse.
I don't want you to read what I read. I want you to say it in your own words.
Mm,
Try, Che. Try.
Family provides deep emotional value,
Mm-hmm.
but can become a harmful center.
Okay.
Mm,
Why? Why do you think?
no.
So he said marriage is not a great centeredness. You should not have a marriage centeredness. He says family centeredness you should not have. Should not have money centeredness. Why? What happens when you have all those?
They make us emotionally dependent.
Mm-hmm. There's something else also. What happens? Can you tell me what?
They may create insecurity.
Yes. Yes. What happens is any changes will create insecurity and they
Yeah.
don't know how to handle it.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Consider again the four life support factors: security, guidance, wisdom, and power. Suppose I derive much of my security from my employment or from my income or net worth. Since many factors affect these economic foundations, I become anxious and uneasy, protective and defensive about anything that may affect them. When my sense of personal worth comes from my net worth, I'm vulnerable to anything that will affect that net worth. But work and money, per se, provide no wisdom, no guidance, and only a limited degree of power and security. All it takes to show the limitation of money center is a crisis in my life or in the life of a loved one. Money centered people often put aside family or other priorities, assuming everyone will understand what that economic demands come first. I know one father who was leaving with his children for a promised trip to the circus when a phone call came for him to come to work instead. He declined. When his wife suggested that perhaps he should have gone to work, he responded, The work will come again, but childhood won't. For the rest of their lives, his children remembered this little act of priority setting, not only as an object lesson in their minds, but as an expression of love in their hearts. Work centeredness. Work centered people may become workaholics, driving themselves to produce at the sacrifice of health, relationships, and other important areas of their lives. Their fundamental identity comes from their work. I'm a doctor, I'm a writer, I'm an actor. Because their identity and sense of self worth are wrapped up in their work, their security is vulnerable to anything that happens to prevent them from continuing in it. Their guidance is a function of the demands of the work. Their wisdom and power come in limited areas of their work, rendering them ineffective in other areas of life. Okay, I'm going to read all the four centeredness and then we'll have a
Okay.
discussion. Okay, 1 minute, please. Huh. Possession centeredness. A driving force of many people is possessions. Not only tangible material possessions like fashionable clothes, homes, cars, boats, and jewelry, but also intangible possessions of fame, glory, or social prominence. Most of us are aware through our own experience how singularly flawed such a center is, simply because it can vanish rapidly and it is influenced by so many forces. If my sense of security lies in my reputation or in the things I have, my life will be in constant state of threat and jeopardy that these positions may be lost or stolen or devalued. If I'm in the presence of someone of greater net worth, of fame or status, I feel inferior. If I'm in the presence of someone lesser net worth of fame or status, I feel superior. My sense of self worth constantly fluctuates. I don't have any sense of constancy or anchorage or persistent selfhood. I'm constantly trying to protect and ensure my assets, properties, securities, position, or reputation. We all have heard stories of people committing suicide after losing their fortunes in a significant stock decline or their fame in political reverse. Okay? Pleasure centeredness. Okay? Another common center closely allied with possessions is that of fun and pleasure. We live in a world where instant gratification is available and encouraged. Televisions and movies are major influences in increasing people's expectations. They graphically portray what other people have and can do in living the life of ease and fun. But while the glitter of pleasure centered lifestyles is graphically portrayed, the natural result of such lifestyles, the impact on the inner person, on productivity, on relationships, is seldom accurately seen. Innocent pleasures in moderation can provide relaxation for the body and mind and can foster family and other relationships. But pleasure per se offers no deep, lasting satisfaction or sense of fulfillment. The pleasure centered person, too soon bored with each succeeding level of fun, constantly cries for more and more. So the next few new pleasure has to be bigger and better, more exciting, with a bigger high. A person in this state becomes almost entirely narcissistic, interpreting interpreting all of life in terms of pleasure it provides in this to the self here and now. Too many vacations that last too long, too many movies, too much TV, too much video game playing, too much undisciplined leisure time in which a person continuously takes the course of least resistance gradually wastes a life. It ensures that a person's capacities stay dormant, that talents remain undeveloped, that the mind and spirit become lethargic, and that the heart is unfulfilled. Where is the security, the guidance, the wisdom, and the power? At the low end of the continuum, in the pleasure of the fleeting moment. Okay, I'm going to stop here. And now you explain to me what the author was saying.
There is saying about different centered people like money centered people, work centered people, and uh, possession centered people, pleasure centered people.
Hmm. What is the definition and what are the differences?
Money centered people often put work on money above family or other important. They will give importance to money.
Okay.
Uh, the other also gave an example that
Yeah, please tell me.
other also gave example about a father leaving his children. He promised his children to a trip. He'll take to trip to a circus. Uh, he got a phone call from work. He declined the trip and gone to work.
No, he didn't. Didn't you see what did he say? What did he say? See, what he said was, uh, one second, 1 minute, please.
So work will come again, but childhood doesn't.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I'm sorry, was just trying to find that. Huh. Okay, next.
Work-centered people, they focus too much on their job or work. Uh, they are workaholics. They ignore their health and family and their personal life.
Okay.
If they lost their job, they feel like they lost everything and they are insecure.
Wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. What happens when you are work centered and you lose your job, right?
And possession centered people, they have possession on their things like cars, houses, clothes,
Yes,
etc.
yes.
They compare with what have others, and it leads to jealousy.
Hmm. True, true. Okay, okay.
Next, pleasure centered people, they focus mainly on having fun.
Hmm.
Always they try to have fun, and their choices are based on what brings their immediate enjoyment, and they in short they
In
chase for short term happiness, and but often miss meaning in life.
good, good, good. So, what I would say is, what happens is when you so when you are at the right age for this book, to tell you the truth. When you define yourself of self-worth on any of these things, on your wife, on your family, on your work, on your money, on your net worth, on your pleasure, okay, on your possessions, what happens? What happens? Can you tell me?
Ma'am, can you say the question? I didn't understand.
Okay. Yeah. So you saw how many centeredness he showed about spouse centeredness, family centeredness, work centeredness, status centeredness, pleasure centeredness. Okay. So
Yes,
what is it correct? I mean, are these choices correct in making your defining yourself based on those, or why? If wrong, yes, why? No, why? Did you get the question? Shall I repeat it again?
yes, ma'am. Repeat it again.
Okay, fine. Now, the author spoke about defining yourself. based on spouse, family, then hmm, family centeredness, money centeredness. Okay, then you have possession centeredness, pleasure centeredness.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so which do you think it's right to do define yourself based on all that? If yes, why? If no, why? Do you think it's right to define yourself based on these criteria? And what do you define yourself? How do you define yourself? This is a hot question, man. Did you get it, Jayant?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then I want an answer. Okay, shall we
No,
discuss? Okay, you tell me. Then we'll discuss.
no idea, ma'am.
No idea?
No, I mean, sir, this does not judge
Okay.
because basing on your identity, things don't fully control.
Hmm.
Like spouse, family, job, money, possessions, may let us leave you.
Yeah,
All of those can shift or disappear or can be taken away.
good. Good. So exactly what, Jayant? So it is basically what happens is you are what he's saying is, so he's giving you what family centeredness is, what spouse centeredness is, what possession centeredness is, and then he's saying what will happen if those change, and it'll change is inevitable, right?
Yes.
So that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying is you should learn. I mean, we'll see what he says later, but right now what he's saying is your sense of self should not be dependent on I mean these factors. Okay. Okay. Malcolm Muggeridge writes a 20th century testimony. When I look back nowadays, or I look back on my life nowadays, which I sometimes do, what strikes me the most forcibly about it is that it seemed at that time most significant and seductive, seems now most futile and absurd. For instance, success in all of its various guises, being known and being praised, ostensible pleasures like acquiring money or seducing women, or traveling, going to and in fro in the world, and up and down in it like Satan, explaining and experiencing whatever Vanity Fair has to offer. In that retrospect, all these exercises in self gratification seem pure fantasy, what Pascal called licking of the earth. Okay?
Yes.
I'm going to question you on that, so please listen carefully. Friend and enemy centeredness. Young people are particularly, though certainly not exclusively, susceptible to becoming friend centered. Acceptance and belonging to a peer group can be almost supremely important. The distorted and ever changing social mirror comes from the source for four life support factors, creating a high degree of dependence on the fluctuating moods, feelings, attitudes, and behavior of others. Friend centeredness can also focus exclusively on one person, taking on some of the dimensions of marriage. The emotional dependence on one individual, the escalating need conflict spiral, and the resulting negative interactions can grow out of friend centeredness. Okay, can you explain this till now? Friend or enemy centeredness?
Friend centeredness, it's like the self worth depends on friends' approval.
Hmm.
We become overly influenced by their uh, words,
By the words, actions.
actions, they say.
Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
Mm,
And what about putting an enemy at the center of one's life? Most people would never think of it, and probably no one would ever do it consciously. Nevertheless, enemy centering is very common, particularly when there is frequent interaction between people who are in the real world. When someone feels he has been unjustly dealt with joy by an by an emotionally or socially significant person, it is very easy for him to become preoccupied with the injustice and make the other person the center of his life. Rather than proactively leading his own life, the enemy-centered person is counter-dependently reacting to the behavior and attitudes of a perceived enemy. One friend of mine who taught at a university became very distraught because of the weaknesses of a particular administrator with whom he had a negative relationship. He allowed himself to think that the man constantly until eventually it became an obsession. It so preoccupied him that it affected the quality of his relationships with his family, his church, his working associates. His He finally came to the conclusion that he had to leave the university and accept a teaching appointment somewhere else. Okay? Wouldn't you really prefer to teach at this university if the man were not here? I asked him. Yes, I would, he responded. But as long as he is here and my staying is too disruptive to everything in life, I have to go. Why have you made this administrator the center of your life? I asked him. He was shocked by the question. He denied it, but I pointed out to him that he was allowing the individual and his weaknesses to distort his gossiping. I'm sorry, uh, distort his en- I'm sorry. I pointed out that he was allowing one individual and his weaknesses to distort his entire map of life, to undermine his faith and the quality of his relationship with his loved ones. He,
ma'am,
yeah,
what does distort mean?
distort means to when it's completely plain, it is normal. Distortion is when there's disturbance.
Okay.
So he's saying distort means he's completely changing the way my map is, his life map, because of one person.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, he finally
Okay.
admitted that this individual had had such an impact on him, but he denied that he himself had made all these choices. He attributed the responsibility for the unhappy situation to the administrator. He himself, he declared, was not responsible. As we talked little by little, he came to realize that he was indeed responsible, but that because he did not handle his responsibility well, he was being irresponsible. Many divorced people fall into a similar pattern. They are still consumed with anger and bitterness and self justification regarding an ex spouse. In a negative sense, psychologically, they are still married. Each need the weaknesses of the former partner to justify the accusations. Many older children go through life either secretly or openly hating their parents. They blame them for past abuses, neglect, or favoritism, and they center their adult life on that hatred, living out the reactive, justifying script that accompanies it. The individual who is a friend or enemy centered has no intrinsic security. Feelings of self worth are volatile, a function of emotional state or behavior of other people. Guidance comes from the person's perception of how others will respond, and wisdom is limited by the social lens or by enemy centered paranoia. Uh, the individual has no power. Other people are pulling the strings. Okay, now can you tell me what have you understood of what I just read? And just give me a minute, Jayant. I want to go get myself some water. Just think your answer till then.
Okay.
Tell me, Jayant. Jayant.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
About enemy centeredness.
Mm-hmm.
Enemy centeredness, like someone, enemy centeredness is when you let someone you dislike or feel wrong, uh, you spend more time thinking about how they hurt or upset you,
Okay.
and we make decisions based on avoiding them
Mm-hmm.
instead of living our own life. We were stuck reacting to the enemy.
Yes, Jayant. Very, very, very nice. And there's something else you forgot about enemy centeredness. So, what happens is the example that the author gave, he says about his friend who never took responsibility of any actions. He always said, "It is all because of him. My life is like in such a bad doldrums because of him."
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, we'll go to the church. And there's another thing I wanted you to understand. So the individual who is friend or enemy centered has no intrinsic security. What do you mean by intrinsic security?
Okay.
Hmm?
What's the word, ma'am? In
Intrinsic.
dreams. No idea.
Okay. So intrinsic is something completely basic and inbuilt. Intrinsic is inbuilt and what the person is made of. So what he's saying is when you are friend or enemy centered, you have no inner strength, no inner security. Okay? Your feelings of self-worth are volatile. What is volatile?
Feel.
No. Volatile means anything that is not stable, that is constantly shifting.
Oh,
Volatile is opposite of stable. One of the uh, opposites. Okay. Okay. And he reacts based on what the other person thinks.
yes,
Yeah. Okay. Now, church centeredness.
ma'am.
One second. Oh my God. Okay, we'll come to identifying your center and we'll stop there. Church centeredness. I
Yes, ma'am.
believe that almost anyone who is seriously involved in any church will recognize that church going is not synonymous with personal spirituality. There are some people who get so busy in church worship and projects that they become insensitive to the pressing human needs that surround them, contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. There are others who attend church far less frequently or not at all, but whose attitudes and behavior reflect a more genuine centering in the principle of the basic Judeo Christian ethic. Having participated throughout my life in organized church and community service groups, I have found that attending church does not necessarily mean living the principles taught in those meetings. You can be active in a church but inactive in its gospel. Okay, I will read up till the before self centeredness and we'll discuss this. In the church centered life, image or appearance can become a person's dominant consideration, leading to hypocrisy that undermines personal security and intrinsic worth. Comes from a social conscience, and the church centered person tends to label others artificially in terms of active, inactive, liberal, orthodox, or conservative. Because the church is a formal organization made up of policies, programs, practices, and people, it cannot by itself give a person any deep, permanent security or sense of intrinsic worth. Living the principles taught by the church can do this, but the organization alone cannot. Nor can the church give a person a constant sense of guidance. Church centered people often tend to live in compartments, acting and thinking and feeling in certain ways on the Sabbath and in totally different ways on weekdays. Such a lack of wholeness or unity or integrity is further threat to security, creating the need for increased labeling and self-justifying. Seeing the church as an end rather than a means to an end undermines a person's wisdom and sense of balance. Although the church claims to teach people about the source of power, it does not claim to be that power itself. It claims to be one vehicle through which divine power can be channeled into man's nature. Okay, Chalak, let me explain to me about church centeredness in your words.
Uh, Church centeredness, people make their main focus of their life as church
Hmm.
instead of actual spiritual values.
That's lovely. Okay. And why does he say it's not right?
Like they follow, they focus on like
Yeah.
it focuses more on the organization than on the values
Perfect. Perfect.
or principles it
Yes.
teaches.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful. They also, what happens is when you're using church as like a end, that means you will get wisdom and sense of balance from it is wrong. No, actually not that. Seeing the church as an end rather than means to an end undermines a person's wisdom and sense of balance. Although church claims to teach people about the source of power, it does not claim to have that power itself. It claims to be one vehicle through which divine power can be channeled through man's nature. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so actually, okay, fine. I want you to find words which you don't understand the meaning and tomorrow speak to Geeta ma'am and ask her to explain it to you or give you proper examples and usage. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to self-centeredness, and after that, 1 minute, identifying your center. Okay, self-centeredness. Oh wow. Hmm. You're going to have fun the next reading.
Mm,
Okay, because we'll finish after the self-centeredness because it's too long. The next one. Hmm?
okay.
Perhaps the most common center today is the self, the most obvious form of selfishness, which violates the values of most people. But if we look closely at many of the popular approaches to growth and self fulfillment, we often find self centering at the core. There is little security, guidance, wisdom, or power in the limited access of self, in the limited center of self. Like the Dead Sea in Palestine, it accepts but never gives. It becomes stagnant. Have you heard of the Dead Sea?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the speciality of Dead Sea?
Specialty is
I mean, I would not say speciality. What puts Dead Sea different than the rest of the seas? What is the thing different in Dead Sea?
uh, compared to self-centeredness to Dead Sea.
Okay. Why?
Mm,
Okay, I'll tell you about it. Let me just finish reading the two paragraphs that's there. On the other hand, paying attention to the development of self in greater perspective of improving one's ability to serve, to produce, to contribute in meaningful ways gives context for dramatic increase in the four life support factors. There are some of the more These are some of the more common centers from which people approach life. It is often much easier to recognize the center in someone else's life than to see it in your own. You probably know someone who puts making money ahead of everything else. You probably know someone whose energy is devoted to justifying his or her position in an ongoing negative relationship. If you look, you can sometimes see beyond behavior into the center that creates it. Okay. Now,
yeah.
or I'll just explain what the this thing is Dead Sea. So Dead Sea is a sea which is landlocked. It's not connected to any ocean, first. Second, there's
Lord.
so much of salt in Dead Sea that if you can float in it. I mean, you can't sink. You sit on it, you can sit in it.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And it is uh it is what that man says is, if you are self-centered, it's like the Dead Sea. That means it's stagnant. It doesn't flow.
Okay.
Okay. And what he says is, if you are self centered in trying to develop yourself to be a better person, to improve your sense of self worth by being a better person, and that's nothing like it. That's beautiful if you do like that. So it is very easy to find people if you look at people around you, you can decide whose center in life is what. And what happens when you have uh, of course, it also is very. I was just looking at, I was reading everything, and I was trying to think where my center is. How do I define myself? Okay, Jant, let's keep all this aside. How do you define yourself?
Position centered.
Your possession center?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay. What will happen if, okay, now you are trying to go to Puttaparthi.
Yes, ma'am.
If you go to Puttaparthi, you can't take your possessions and go.
Yes, ma'am.
So, what will happen to your self worth then?
Will be sad.
Okay. Yeah, you'll be sad. So I always thought my intrinsic, I'm a person who defines myself not by the money I have, not by the possessions I have, not by my family, not by my, I would say, not by my self. My self worth is not dependent on all these things, but they all play a role in my sense of self worth. Okay, they're not completely. My sense of self worth is not dependent on all these things.
Oh,
My sense of self worth is something I believe we should. I mean, I believe in trying to become a better person every day. I believe that I should be. I believe gratitude is something I should be always doing. I should always help others. But again, I'm trying to think of what is centering me. The more we read this book, maybe I'll find my center too. So, Jayant,
yeah,
again, let's close this meeting because once we start the next one, identifying your center, it is a very, very deep thing. Tomorrow is Friday. If
yes,
no reader is there, even I'll come and read this again. So probably we'll discover what is our center between you
yeah,
and I. Okay?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
And
Learn to say Sairam because that's what you're going to say when you go to Puttaparthi.
you know the college, man.
I go to Puttaparthi regularly.
Okay,
I don't know the college, but I go to Puttaparthi regularly. My children are named Sai Ganesh and Sai Sanjay by Puttaparthi Baba. My husband and I, the whole family is, we are devotees.
okay. Even my name is James Sai.
Oh, your name is Jen Sai. Okay, lovely. Okay, lovely. So, anyway, Swami has his way of bringing us into each other's lives. There's a reason for it. I wish you all the very best for your interview,
Thank you.
and we will help you however we can. What I would suggest, I think Geeta ma'am, we told, she'll also tell you, do a little research on Swami's work and how um, uh, they may ask you about what you know about Swami's work.
Yes, ma'am. They'll ask a question about Swami in the interview.
Yes, they will. So just try to just think about the answer. Don't think you have to be because what Swami is to me is not what he's to you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So you think of an answer which is in your words and which you can so think it over and practice it with Geeta ma'am so that when they ask you that question, you'll be able to speak fluently and properly. What happens? All the ideas are here. If you don't tell it out, it's very difficult at that point in time to tell the right answer.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you. Sandhya, you can close the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.